Hello again. Good afternoon. I'm so excited to welcome you to our closing keynote speech today about person-centered quality care. I think this is the most excited part that I've been waiting for, so it's very exciting. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our guest speaker, Vicky Schmidt. Vicky graduated with her Bachelor's of Science in Marketing Management in 1988 from Florida State University College of Business. Shortly afterwards, she met her husband and relocated to Michigan, where she received her real estate license and became the chief operating officer of their business in building and property management. She also worked at a women's health clinic as a receptionist and surgical scheduler. She got a little taste of our world in that role. Following her accident, Vicky she's provided one-on-one support to many paraplegic patients and their families. In 2004, she partnered with the CPM Resource Center to share her story with literally thousands of healthcare providers across the nation to bring the message of what is needed for the best quality care possible. In 2009, she began competing around the nation with the U.S. Tennis Wheelchair Women's A division, and Vicky was instrumental in the growth of that division. And in 2014, she finished the year at the very top for singles and doubles with #1 rankings. These are the objectives for Vicky's session today. We really want you to know why telling the patient's story is so important, and listening to the patient's story is so important for person-centered care, which is the theme of her talk today. And also to identify the most vulnerable moments for patients and families and when they really need us there. Thirdly, to explain the importance of engaging in patients' lives in ways that is meaningful to help them heal, and to describe the ideal workforce, the healthcare workforce for patient-centered care. So this is a very personal and intimate presentation, conversation I would call it actually, that Vicky is going to provide for us. I wanted to share with you personally how I met Vicky. I've known Vicky for 15 years. We've been on a journey together. I was actually introduced to Vicky through my husband, Kevin, who is in real estate development, and he came home one day and said, "Oh my goodness, Michelle, you have got to meet Vicky Schmidt." And then a few weeks went by, and he was consulting with her on intentionally designing a home for her and her family. And he'd come home and he'd say again, "Michelle, you have to meet Vicky." So he finally took me to her home one day, and I met her and her family. I like to tell everyone it was love at first sight. What a special soul, what a special woman and family. And we went on a multi-year journey together and working with her so that she could tell her story to thousands of clinicians across the world. Really, we've shown her story in Brazil and many different countries, and it's universal, which you will find out. So today you're very lucky because you get the real Vicky in person. And she's very special, and I'm so excited that you get to meet her today. Before Vicky comes up, I want to show a brief video clip. See, Vicky was a very healthy person. Her and her family had what they described as a perfect life, and this video is the beginning of their entry into the U.S. healthcare system.
This is 7 and 4 News at 6. Coverage you can count on.
A rollover accident sends a northern Michigan family to the hospital, 2 with serious injuries. A Crawford County couple and their 2 young children were traveling on Mansalona Highway in Antrim County Friday afternoon. They were on their way to the airport in Traverse City, but never made it. The accident happened on County Road 38 and Sand Lake Road, just 6 miles east of Mansalona. The family of 4 was in an SUV. Police say it appeared the driver hit the shoulder and lost control. Then the SUV rolled over and over until landing in a spot against these trees. The 2 children walked away from the wreck, but their parents suffered serious injuries. The father was thrown through the window and knocked unconscious. The mother, who was buckled up, was pinned inside the vehicle. They had to cut the roof off so they could extricate her. All four were taken to Otsego County Memorial Hospital. The parents were taken to Saginaw St. Mary's Hospital and are in serious condition.
Please welcome Vicky Schmidt to the stage.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm honored to share my story with you, and I hope it gives you insight. And I am an open book. I'm happy to share whatever you are willing to learn and ready to learn. My first experience with the medical field came early in life. I was born in 1964 in Austin, Texas, 6 weeks premature, weighing just over 3 pounds and given a 1 in 4 chance of living. When I finally started walking at 18 months old, my only goal was to catch up with my big brother and then competitively try to surpass him. My grandmother has always told me, or she's passed now, so my grandmother always told me that I was a fighter, but I never really knew what she meant. Later in life, she was proven right. The summer of 2001, I was living what I considered a dream life. I was married to the man I loved, had 2 precious children, our 8-year-old son, Trevor, and our 3-year-old daughter, Tori. We ran our own building and remodeling business out of our home, also investing in and managing our own real estate properties. We were both nature lovers and adventure seekers. We enjoyed our flexible lifestyle and felt in control of our own destiny. I met Terry right after college. It was the summer of '88, and I was still living in Florida after earning my degree. Out of the blue, my mother called me to tell me that she and her husband had a scuba diving buddy that she wanted me to meet. Actually, he wanted to meet me. I was reluctant because she had done this to me a few times before with disastrous results. I finally relented, and she flew me to Michigan for a visit with her and to meet this man. After a 2-week visit, I was back in Florida, packing my belongings in a U-Haul trailer. I hit the road with my cat and my poodle, and I never looked back. Terry and I were married shortly after and living in Lansing, Michigan. Terry was a hardworking, talented, and established builder with a mind for business and an eye for detail. He liked to do the work himself, usually alone, because no one else could meet his standards. I soon joined him in the business, mainly taking over the office and managerial tasks. But the best of times were when we could work together side by side on a project. We worked hard, but we also played even harder. We were avid scuba divers and enjoyed the challenge of shipwreck diving the Great Lakes all summer, then retreating to the coral reefs of the Caribbean in the winter. Travel became much more difficult once we had our children, so we began looking for cottages up north and found a place within a few months. It needed some work and soon became our favorite pastime and project. This investment we could put our heart and soul into. It took us 3 years to make the cottage a home that we wanted to live in, and then it became a natural decision to move north, relocate our business, and live at the lake full time. We loved being surrounded by nature and belonging to a small community where we felt we could make a difference. Trevor and Tori attended the nearby elementary school, and I volunteered almost daily in their classrooms. I joined the PTA and was elected president the following year. It seemed like a dream life to us. We had everything we desired, mainly each other. Then on August 10th, 2001, life as we knew it changed forever. A road defect caused our vehicle to leave the pavement and flip end over end 3 times before being stopped by a tree. I woke to the sound of my son's voice. "Mom, where's Dad?" I opened my eyes, and it felt as if the world was shattering into a million pieces. I was in excruciating pain. It was hard to breathe, and I couldn't get my bearings because everything was upside down. Then when I realized that Terry was no longer in the vehicle, I was filled with dread. We must have been in an accident, and if Terry is no longer in here with us, then he was ejected at 55 miles per hour, and no one can survive that. Still dazed from the impact, my eyes searched for the faces of my children in the crumpled interior. Were they okay? Trevor seemed to be hanging from the ceiling, and I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. I struggled to focus on the face of my 3-year-old daughter before me. Tori was silent and motionless. I couldn't bear the thought of her being hurt. My grip on her car seat had stopped me from being fully thrown out the back passenger window. Trevor was trying to hand me back my earring and was asking to unbuckle himself. I was hesitant to let him because the Tahoe was still unsteady and rocking. Unsure if I would survive, I began giving him instructions, asking, such as the phone numbers of his grandmother and our neighbors, asking him to repeat them back to me. As he brushed the glass off my face, I assured him we would be okay. My gaze returned to Tori, and I screamed in horror as her eyes were now closed. This made her cry, which gave me mixed feelings of relief and then remorse for having scared her further. My mind was racing. Is this the end for Terry and I? Is this how my life would end, with my children being orphans? This I could not accept. Before I could fully comprehend all that it would mean, I made a vow that I would survive and I would accept whatever limitations I had in order to raise my children. At that moment, I wasn't certain about Terry's survival, but I was of my own. I would find a way, but was help on the way? Would I have to send my 8-year-old son out in search of it? Then the back door of the vehicle opened and I saw the silhouette of a man. Terry was found on the ground near the vehicle. Both of his lungs had collapsed, but somehow he was still breathing on his own. The first car to pass the accident had 2 nurses inside. They were now attending to him, waiting for help to arrive. He was taken by ambulance to the community hospital 20 miles away. However, as he was being secured in the hospital, on the helicopter at the hospital, it was discovered that his spleen had ruptured, and he was rushed into surgery. Back at the accident site, they used the jaws of life to access Tori and I. They put me in one ambulance and the 2 kids in another. I remember feeling each bump on the country road and it seeming to take forever. When I arrived at the hospital, I was placed in Terry's helicopter, and that's the last thing I remember. The children were huddled together, yet alone, on a hospital bed, waiting for our neighbor to arrive and console them. My mother, who lived an hour away, was already en route to be with them. Within hours, Terry and I had a network of medical professionals attending to each of us. Terry arrived in Saginaw in a comatose state and was non-responsive. He was admitted to the neuro ICU. The initial CAT scan and MRI showed multiple cranial hemorrhages. Every part of his brain had been damaged, even his brainstem. He had multiple rib fractures, which had punctured both lungs. He was intubated and placed on a respirator and then later given a trach. His pelvis had been crushed. A feeding tube was inserted and a Foley catheter was placed. His initial Glasgow motor scale, which ranges from 3 to 15, was a 3, showing that he had no eye, verbal, or motor response. He was not expected to live. I had multiple fractures over my body and face, a collapsed lung, a cervical fracture, and a mild brain injury, which wouldn't be diagnosed until much later. A spinal cord injury at thoracic 5/6 was my most significant trauma. I would lie flat on my back for weeks, waiting to be strong enough and stable enough for the spinal stabilization surgery. Shortly after being admitted to the neuro ICU, I was intubated, which caused me extreme anguish. When you are stripped of everything that matters to you, when you are facing death, and you are completely dependent on others, there is such a desperation to create that human connection with the person that you are dependent on, the person attending to you at that moment. Your survival depends on it. You have to make certain that the person in front of you that is caring for you actually cares for you. Patient-centered care means everything when your life or that of a loved one is on the line. With my voice silenced, I could no longer advocate for myself or Terry. It was hard for me to trust anyone, to trust any of you, because I believed that your motivation, your first motivation would be to protect me. I feared that you wouldn't tell me the truth, especially if Terry had died. I feared that you would underestimate him, that you would underestimate me and my capacity to handle the truth. You wanted me to rest because I was unstable, but I could not. I began writing on notepad after notepad, desperate for you to know our story. I wanted you to know who we were, why we mattered, and what mattered most to us. I wanted you to care about us, to know how strong we were, to give us every chance that we could to recover, and to know that we were the parents of two small, beautiful children who needed us both. At some point, they had removed my contacts. My glasses and the rest of my belongings, which were packed in a suitcase, were now scattered along the highway. Now I couldn't see either. Every time one of you entered my room, I would beckon you to come to me. Unless you were right in my face, I couldn't see yours. I would grip my visitors when they came to see me. Pulling them close, I would grill them about Terry. I would ask them questions, and I would compare the details of what I had been told, making sure that the stories matched up. If there was the slightest inconsistency, I would take note of it. For the longest time, I wasn't sure he was alive. It was never offered for me to see Terry, even though I would pass his room on a gurney for numerous MRIs, CAT scans, and x-rays. One day, a dear friend of mine stopped them from rolling me by and insisted that I be allowed to see him. She wouldn't take no for an answer. It took quite a bit of finagling, but eventually I was rolled up next to him. I was allowed only a moment, but it finally gave me some peace. After my spinal cord stabilization surgery, a social worker came in to talk to me about going to a rehabilitation hospital. I told her I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't leaving without my husband, and I wasn't a drug addict, so I didn't need any rehab. No. I had so much to learn. The beginning of September, a month out of the accident, I was taken 2 hours away in an ambucab to the west side of the state, to Mary Freebed Rehabilitation Hospital in Grand Rapids. There I would begin to heal, to learn to accept my new condition, and to regain my independence. This was acute rehabilitation, with 6 hours a day of physical, occupational, and recreational therapy. They also provided me with driver's rehabilitation and psychology. With each new complication came a new specialist and a team. I had entered your world, a complex system of which I knew little. I had never felt more vulnerable or dependent in my whole life. However, I knew that no matter how much any of you cared for us, you couldn't care more than I did. Yet I knew I was dependent on you and that each one of you would affect my outcome. I knew that the information you had was also vital, and I longed to have access to that information too. I had hoped that you were informed, that each of you were up to date with our evolving conditions, but I wanted to be informed myself, to become educated, and to be a part of the team. I wanted to have access to our records instead of a printed report here or there. I wanted to be able to make informed decisions, to know the alternatives, the possible complications, and all of the possibilities, even if it was outside your realm. I wanted the best of care. I wanted the best out of each and every one of you. That summer of 2001, there was a song that moved me deeply. I knew that it conveyed a strong message for me to share later in life. or even after, but I didn't know when. That message and who it is for became so clear to me over time. It goes to the heart of what I hope remains in the hearts and the minds of each of you as you look to serve families like mine in our darkest hour. First as healthcare providers, now as leaders influencing the way that healthcare is delivered in our country, and finally as mentors to the generations that follow you. I encourage you to always give your best and to never let the fire of what brought you here go out. In the words of the song, I hope you never fear those mountains in the distance, never settle for the path of least resistance. When you come close to selling out, reconsider. And when you get the choice to sit it out or dance, I hope you dance. This is for you.
Vicky, wow. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's so powerful. One of the things I really love about your story is you see in watching it, it's a passage of time. And I think it always strikes me how when we care for patients, sometimes it's easy to be in the moment, but we don't realize how important it is for the long haul, right? Yeah. So your story does that beautifully. So again, thank you for sharing. And I also really like it because, did you notice all the disciplines taking care of her and Terry, right? It's just brings to light that it does, not one discipline could really care for you too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even the dogs, you know, they're very important in the healing process.
They are.
So I just want to ask you a few questions and let's have a conversation about other things about your story that I think, and I know all of my colleagues here would be really valuable for them to know your perspective. Okay?
Yes.
All right. So the first thing is, with a spinal cord injury, we know that you're at risk for a lot of complications, right?
Yes. Yes.
And one weak link, it could change the whole dynamic. So can you think of a time where it made a difference that not only the individual caring for you was important, but also the team and maybe some event or some complication that became a reality for you?
Yes. Goodness. It was, in 2001, there wasn't a comprehensive medical, record or much electronics at all. They didn't rely on those. And it didn't take long for me to accumulate quite a record. And I was told, and I would often see it then, and once I was aware that it was 2 like New York City size phone books of records that were accumulated, and it would be daunting to a specialist coming in or someone new to the team. And I do remember one, very kind doctor in particular addressing me and coming into the room, and addressing me directly and telling, wanted to introduce himself, and he said, "I'm sorry, but I'm going to go now and review your chart." I walked by it on the way in, and he's the one that told me how thick it was, and he was just like, "It may take me a while, but I'll be back." And it's just alarming at that point. I thought, oh my goodness. And it was in my head, I was like, what is he going to be able to pull out of that, and where, and is he going to miss anything? And my mind was just always working. I was just trying so hard to be, aware of everything. I didn't want to miss anything if I could catch something, or, so I became aware of that, and that was, just trouble, made me think, oh my goodness, and realizing how complex it was and how many people were involved, and I. When I was in the rehabilitation hospital, they were measuring my legs, and were educating me on different risks. But this one in particular, they were measuring my legs. They would mark them with a Sharpie, and once a week they would measure them with a tape measure. And I asked them what they were doing, and they told me that they were monitoring this and were measuring the circumference to make sure that I didn't develop a DVT, a blood clot, because that I was at high risk for that.
Right, right.
And they made me aware. They educated me on the other symptoms, that my leg could be hot. Maybe I would start to feel sick. And so I went down to therapy on a Friday, and coming back up in the elevator, I noticed that my leg was swollen. I put my leg, I didn't have accurate sensation, especially at that time, and I placed my leg on my hand on my leg, and it felt hot and swollen, and I looked down, I was like, oh my gosh, this, my left leg is bigger than my right. I could see it visually, and I went back up to my room, and they got me back in bed. And I made them aware of that evening, the nursing staff. And the next morning, it was now Saturday morning, And it was usually a different team on the weekend, and as you all know, I'm sure. And the nurse tech came in, and she's like, so it's time to start getting you ready for therapy. And I was like, isn't that, I'm not
supposed to go
that.
down to therapy right now.
That's not indicated. Like, isn't that, I shouldn't, I don't think I should be doing that if I have a possible, DVT. And so she said, well, let me check into that for you. And she left, and she came back in, and she said, well, I talked to the doctor on call, and he thinks you're going to be just fine, and you can go down for therapy. And I said, but that's not what I know. I said, I don't think I'm supposed to move until this is diagnosed. And she was just kind of like, well, are you sure? I did call, trying to convince me, and I defiantly said I was not going anywhere until I was properly examined, and that we, run some tests to diagnose this. I wasn't aware of what test yet, but, and so that went on all weekend. They would say, oh, would you like to get ready? Now it's the afternoon. Would you like to go down to therapy? I'm like, nope, not going down to therapy till somebody checks out my leg. And so I stayed in bed all weekend and defying, orders. And on Monday morning, my doctor came back, looked at my legs, said, oh yeah, let's get, run these tests. By that time I was very swollen, and those tests were very hard to do. But it was diagnosed and confirmed that I did have a DVT. So I was very thankful that I'd been educated on the process, but they did, that I was let down in that moment.
Right,
and I was very thankful that I could advocate for myself, and did so strongly, because I might not be here.
Right. So we did a great job in teaching you, but then when it came down to actually being there, we missed it.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is really related to a lot about what we call evidence-based practice, and why it's so important that we do know the standards of care for things like, preventing complications, knowing what to look for, and that we do it not only like I'm a nurse, but that everyone is aware of that, and then how we work together as a team. So in evidence-based practice, we do really strive to know what is the latest evidence for spinal cord injury, how to prevent a complication such as DVT from happening, and also that it's our clinical expertise. We think about the three-legged stool of evidence-based practice, right? The evidence, clinical expertise, but another part is what you wish, what you want, what's important to you. And you shared a lot about that, with us earlier as far as knowing your story. But what are just some other things that we can do as clinicians that really meet your personal needs, your patient preference needs? Were there things that we did really well that made a difference?
Oh my goodness. The biggest, I would say, the biggest differences are and the things that stayed with me the most were when I was having a human interaction with one of the providers, and it could be over time, especially, I felt like I developed a relationship with everyone in the team. All the way down from housekeeping to technology, anything in my room, to all of the disciplines and the therapists and all the different doctors, and whoever would, so many people would enter my room each day, especially, initially, and I got used to it over time. Someone coming in the room, usually disturbing my rest.
Yeah, we're good at that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, are you kidding? I'm tired. But anyway, no. But when anyone would open the door, before I even laid eyes on them, I could feel their energy almost, and I could tell if they'd had were having a good day, having a bad day, if they were overworked, stressed out, unsupported, by the system they were working in, because I did go, and over time I've been to quite a few facilities now. But I could just tell who, and who still, who was connected and who wanted to, connect with me, would make eye contact with me. Coming in the room, making it. And
So being present with you,
yes,
could feel.
yes. And if they were, just distracted and had too many patients to attend to, or were exhausted and just so much to cover and do and go on to the next person, they just wouldn't give me that time or that regard, and it was just very unsettling to me, because I am a very personal person, and it felt just disrespected in a way, or not involved in, I don't know, that I didn't matter, I guess,
What about the human touch?
Yes.
What about the human touch?
So it would be the eye contact, but it was the touching, not being afraid to touch me, and not in a medical way. It would be like pat my hand, or squeeze me, wherever even I wouldn't even care if it hurt,
Yeah.
It's like, oh, not that arm, or that's where my tube is going, or whatever. It would be like I just touching my hand. And there was one doctor in particular, and he was head of the whole spinal cord team, and he and I, he was a very strong personality and an ego. He was brilliant and wonderful in so many ways, but often he was larger than life. But in one moment when I had been, and I don't want to overtalk, but I had called for a meeting. At that point, I met Mary Freebed. I had gone over to back to Terry's. He was still in his coma, and had developed MRSA in his he had gotten pneumonia, ventilator-acquired pneumonia, and there was just these very severe complications going on, and I wanted to have a team conference of you. I wanted to talk to the neuro doctor and his pulmonologist, and so I went back there, got dismissed, let out of Mary Freebed, and taken over there, given horrible news that he probably wouldn't ever come out of his coma, that he was brain dead and a vegetable, and things like, it's like. So the power of one doctor's words, just regarding us as I don't know, it was just very callous. And he said, if he lives through, this pneumonia and MRSA in his lungs, if he lives through the brain injury, he'll probably die from this infection in his lungs now and in his body. And if he does survive, there'll come a time when you wish he had died. Yeah. So I go back to Mary Freebed, and I'm holding myself together on that ride. I can remember just trying to process this. I did go in to see Terry, by the way, on the way out, and I went to his bedside with the kids, holding his hand and talking to him. It's like, I am alive. I'm alive. I need you. The kids need you. You need to wake up. It's time to wake up after I'd just been given this horrible news. And I was just pleading with him to fight and to live. And it was so hard with me doing my own, therapy across the state. I would call at the end of the night, and ask the nurse, would you please go and put the phone to his ear? And I would talk to him, but it never, nothing was happening. And so I go and I plead with him to wake up. I leave and I go back across the state. And that morning, my neurosurgeon, my spinal cord, my physiatrist, cried with me, because it was horrible news, cried with me, held my hand. Yeah. And I will never, never forget that. And that, he and I didn't always get along, but I will always be so thankful for him for giving me that time and treating me.
Heart to heart, person to person.
Yes. Yeah, and letting, just supporting me, and wasn't filling me with medical, information. It was just purely a personal thing. But I should say, Terry began to wake up from his coma that morning.
Yeah. Another question I have for you. Vicky went to the Hill with us, by the way, on Thursday, which was fabulous, having a patient with us. So she's learned a lot about NAP and what we're about. And so as you know, we have 14 different professions that are part of the National Archives of Practice. And of the 14, that you've learned about, are there others that have been very instrumental in your healing process that maybe aren't part of the 14 that you and I've talked about? Like, what are the key? Who's missing? That was one of the questions I wanted her to really think about.
Well, I didn't give this therapy much respect at first, and I feel like maybe a lot of people don't. But, you know, to me, at first it was like, of course, living. You know, that's your main goal for everyone. It's like, I've got to, you know, make it through this and get to this point. But when I was in therapy, it was all about physical therapy and occupational therapy. And then there's something, you know, on my schedule called recreational therapy. And I was like, what is that? I don't have any time for recreation. I got some work to do. Yeah. Do you see me? It's like, I got to get the, you know, I got some work. And I was just like, well, that sounds hokey. You know, I don't know. It's just like, oh, I don't have time for that. But over time, and you know, maybe not in the acute stages, at first I was just like, I don't know, you know, what am I going to be able to, I just didn't quite get it. But over time, I would say it's become the most instrumental therapy. And
What's it allowed you to do? How has it made a difference?
It gives you back a part of your person. That's the core of who you are, that just gives you your passion in life, or can give you a sense of pride, I guess, and you can be looked at in a way that isn't, you know, like when I'm in a big room or anywhere, it's, you know, you turn a lot of heads because you're different. And it's just like, well, she's the girl, you know, the girl in the wheelchair over there. And it's like, you know, but when you do recreational sports, and when like I got involved with wheelchair tennis, for instance, I mean, it made me feel strong.
Right.
And I was looked at then as an athlete. And I got to compete and become, you know, better and better at that and compete at so many different levels. And you have to travel international, you know, not international, I would love that, but not yet. I had to raise my kids. But anyway, I traveled nationally, and it was just wonderful. And my rehab hospital supported me in doing that and offered such a comprehensive program like that. But it gives you back your person and what matters to you. I don't know, and the pride that it gives you. You can't get in therapy.
It's adapting to your new reality and having that resource and that therapy to really help you do that.
So recreational therapists are just, they should be here. They should. And you'd love having them. I know you all probably know a few, but they're amazing people. They are.
Oh, and I know we talked about in the acute phase how important respiratory therapy was with the ventilation and the tracheostomies. And then also nutrition and dietitian in your diet later had a really big impact on your healing as well.
It did. It did. Yeah. That was a huge thing because I developed a lot of digestion issues from being on so many antibiotics. It really just destroyed my system, my intestines, and they became very permeable. I discovered after exploring that, and I was, some tests were done that discovered all these sensitivities that I had developed because I was having these toxins go right into my bloodstream. And so after all the testing was done, nutrition was huge, and it really, I had become a different person over the years. I couldn't digest my food anymore, and I was gaining so much weight, and it was bizarre. It was like, what is going on? And once I changed my diet, it was drastic. And it didn't take any medication. It changed my life again. It was just like I was giving back my life again because I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't figure it out. So
well, I think it demonstrates not only for you but for all of us, health is a continuous process for all of us, and again, just having all of the right providers there when you need them to help you in that part of your journey and for you to teach us as well. All right, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I want to ask you, how's Terry today and where's Terry? Because that's when I have the privilege of sharing Terry and Vicky's story. That's probably the number one question I get. So fill us in on what's going on with Terry now.
Goodness, well, we live separately now. With Terry losing so much of his identity, he does, he requires 24-hour care. He can do a lot of things by himself. It's amazing. A lot of his ADLs he can do. but yeah, he's very, very injured and compromised, cognitively and physically. But his identity, he's lost so much of it that all he wanted to do was be back up at our lake house. Yeah. And we were living in Grand Rapids. We had the kids in school, and it had this beautiful home built that was completely accessible.
So that house you saw in the video, the first house Terry built, his hands touched every part of that first home, and then the second home was designed for the kids to go to, to raise the kids, and was accessible and well designed. And
he had his workshop downstairs, and it was terrifying for me because with the power tools. And at first, I completely coddled him and just controlled him, and he became increasingly angry over time as he lost so much control over his life, and I was now the boss and the caretaker, and I wasn't his wife anymore, and we weren't equal partners anymore like we were. And over time, that it became more and more evident, I guess. And I just realized I needed to give. All he wanted to do was be back up north, and when that was suggested, it was like, okay, maybe I opened up a little bit to that, and I realized how important that was to him, and I needed to give that piece of him back and let him go. Yeah.
So he's up north now again.
So he lives up at the lake house. He requires, my brother is his primary caregiver, and he has 24-hour care, and he's much happier, and yes, he's okay. But he lives his own life as much as he can, and that's where he wants to be, and he's much happier now. Yeah.
So I understand you have some special guests here today with you.
I do.
Who's here with you?
My daughter, Tori.
Tori, can you stand up real quick? Yes. Tori's that cute little girl in the boat dancing.
She's still dancing.
She's still dancing.
Yes.
And who else is here with you?
My dearest and longest friendship, my friend Judy is here.
Judy,
she's been here with me. Always.
Judy was her friend that made her go into Terry's room. So thank you, Judy.
She was amazing. So calming to me. They'd often make everyone else leave the room because my blood pressure would shoot up with my family in there and everybody, and they'd only allow me a little bit of time, or my family a little bit of time, and they're like, you all have to leave, because I would become too excited, and then the nurse said, but you can stay.
We all need a friend like Judy.
She's playing with my hair. She went and got a comb, and it was just like combing my hair and touching me and calming. Never. I love Judy.
Yeah. Well, I think as providers too, we know these things, right? And we know how important it's not just the patient, but it's the family and everything. Those significant others that are part of caring for the patient as well. So I think that's another very valuable part of your story, Vicky. It is. So, Vicky Schmidt, ladies and gentlemen, isn't she awesome? Thank you. Thank you all. We did leave, time for questions, because if you wanted a question for Vicky, please go to the mic and ask. We have almost 10 minutes. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask? Comment?
No, I might have covered it all.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Cindy Koviak. I've seen you many times, Vicky, from Grand Rapids. One of the things that Michelle asked you was therapists or other health professionals that you think should be part of the academies. And so my question is, have you had much contact with people who've gone through rehab where one of their major therapies has been music therapy? And I'm asking that question because of the things I've seen in the news and heard about Gabby Giffords.
Oh, yes. Do you know? No, not really. Goodness.
She does like music, though, I will tell you
do.
that.
You know, oh. And I remember family members putting, telling me of putting headphones on Terry, hoping to wake him, and asking me about that. And I do remember, gosh, it was early on where it was some type of sound therapy, and we had to buy really nice headphones in order to hear the music. But I do remember a little bit about that, but I'm fascinated. I wish I had more. I love music. I could never play anything, but yes, I'm sorry. No, I don't.
Well, there is,
to
Cindy's question, there are music therapists, and they are growing in the field. I know I've had, oh, your daughter's one?
My daughter is.
Oh, well, there you go. Maybe you,
But,
yeah.
I've learned much more about the field.
Yeah.
And right from the time that I've learned a lot about the field through my daughter.
Sure.
And I've learned a lot of the science because there is a science that has to do with the music theory and the sounds and the amplitude and the frequency of various
makes
things.
perfect sense to me. I remember trying to help my son as a child with learning issues and didn't fit into the system very well, and playing Mozart for him. I'd heard of that. I was reading that, and I think it makes perfect sense. So what you're saying.
All right, I'll have to put some.
I'm Margaret. I'm a pediatric OT. I'm just curious to know if you could speak to the navigation of getting the mental health services for your children and sort of how that all played out while you were healing and your husband was healing at the time.
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that one. I didn't become aware of any resources early on for them. There really was nothing for them. I was told that, and I had been told that our situation was unique and that we were both so critically injured. Like usually, one person will be, or the other will die, or it's like you're not both so critically injured. And the loss for our children, especially they were so young, and Tori was barely verbal, and that's always been a concern of mine, is that she didn't have that verbal outlet, and she doesn't have the memory either. But I always reassure her. It's like, Tori, you lived through this. You experienced this. Just because you can't remember, like you were witness to that trauma. But it lacked initially. They didn't receive anything for a long time, and I really did search for that for them. When we got out, social work helped. We were very fortunate that we were injured in a car accident, so we had a lot of good resources in the state of Michigan. It was incredible. Like, we were really the cream of the crop with others that I ran into over time that were envious of what I could receive that they did not have access to.
I do remember, Vicky, you and I were at a conference together in California that you were speaking at, and we went around and we were looking at all these posters of, we called them Wisdom from the Field, of people presenting of what they were doing around interprofessional and evidence-based care. And you and I stopped together at a poster, I don't know if you remember this, and it was a child life therapist, and they had playthings.
Yes.
Remember that on the table?
Yes.
And I remember you said to me, wow, wish I would have known about that. And because their role is to help children in family situations. But I remember you saying that to me. That would have been valuable if you would have known about that.
And actually, Tori had her birthday September 9th, so within a month after the accident. And I remember one of our friends, we had celebrated in the hospital, had a birthday party for her. and someone gave her a doctor kit, and she sat on the floor and replayed the accident. My mother was having them do it with cars, but then given the doctor kit, she would attend, she would be the person laying there and attended to, and she would moan like I was, making the same frequency of a moan that relieved the pain for me. And so that through play she did, but there was never anything structured. That would have been so beautiful, and they really did need it. Thank you for that.
Hello, Vicky. I'm over here. I had the pleasure of going on the hill with Vicky, and I got to tell you, she's a firecracker. Don't get in her way, or she'll run you over, and be nice about it. And I think one of the things was just answered, but that is, I'd almost like you to take the patient-centered perspective off and put family up there.
Yes.
Because in many cases, even if someone has a minor injury, it has changed the whole family dynamics in such a way that they are not going back to the same family or even areas that they had before. And how much more affected is that when, as you said, who was left to advocate for Terry, to advocate for the kids, when you're just trying to advocate for yourself and you're the other side of the state? I can't even imagine. And well, also, because as I mentioned earlier, my husband had gentamicin-induced vestibulopathy at age 31 and had zero function bilaterally, which changed everything in our family, and our kids were preschool, and what that has meant from that point on. And if you think going on disability is hard, you should try to convince people you're trying to get off of disability and you want to return to work, which he was able to do. But I think in that stand, we tend to focus on interprofessional within how we care for this one patient, forgetting that this one patient is a piece of a bigger jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, they're hurting and injured as well, yes.
Right, and we may not recognize that. And I'm going to play off what Cynthia said, because Gabby Giffords was treated by a speech pathologist, Dr. Nancy Helm-Esterbrooks, who wrote the book on melodic intonation therapy and was able to use that to help her regain her speech. And we've even had a certified music therapist come through our graduate program in speech pathology and be able to merge those two beautifully, both with preschool children and adults. So just wanted to say you rock, and welcome.
Thank you.
I think that's I'm looking at the time. It's
it's
after 4:15.
Uh-oh.
So again, thank you, Vicky,
Yeah.
and thank you for the questions, and thank you for go out there and dance.
Tonight, yeah.